फूलों को किसने बनाया, फूलों को ईश्वर जो स्वर में है. All together, so I'll sing and you'll sing with me. Do you think you can do it? Okay. किसने बनाया फूलों को, फूलों को, फूलों को, किसने बनाया फूलों को, ईश्वर जो स्वर में है. Great job, everyone. We're just going to do that first, but that was one song that I learned while I was in India for 11 months. That was a Sunday school song. And before I talk about what I did in India, I wanted to discuss why I went to India in the first place. So my first time in India was actually in 2022 for a course with Goshen College called Ecology and Sustainability in the Himalayas. And during the course, we trekked in the Himalayas. That's my class. And not only did we do that, but we visited many religious sites, and we predominantly stayed in the northwestern part of India. But during my time there, I noticed how different India is from any other place I've been to. Not that I've traveled much, but even when I went to Ecuador in 2023, it was just so vastly different than, India was much more vastly different than the US. And I think that's because the dominant religion in India is Hinduism, which isn't even an Abrahamic religion. And this is just a map from Pew Research showing the dominant religion in each state of India. And not only that, but I noticed how diverse India is. It's not only diverse in religion, there's Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, and Christianity. Christians make up about 3% of India. It's also diverse linguistically. I don't know how accurate this map is, but it shows the different dominant regional languages in India. And even though when I was in India in 2022, we mostly occupied this part or traveled in this part, it was still linguistically diverse, especially when we went up in the Himalayan region. So I noticed how diverse India was when I was there, and I also noticed how different it was. We drove on the opposite side of the road, the way people ate was different, the fundamental beliefs of people probably differs vastly from our own Western culture, which is dominated by Christianity. And then when I got home in 2022, after that trip, I realized how India is gaining recognition on the global stage. It's becoming much more globally recognized. Even though it's always been globally recognized, it's being considered as a powerful country. As of 2023, India became the highest populated country in the world. India also has the 5th largest economy in the world, and India has, I don't know the source of this, sorry about that, but India has the largest diaspora, meaning it has the largest population of immigrants living outside the homeland. In the US alone, Asian Indians are the highest earners of all the racial and ethnic groups. And there are many people of Indian descent taking on the global stage. So we're going to play a game, and we're going to play Name That Person. So I'm going to point at the person, and then you're going to shout the name of the person. So I'm going to point at this screen. So top left, who is this? Who is this? UK guy? That's Rishi Sunak. Who is this? Usha Vance, J.D. Vance's wife, the vice president candidate of Donald Trump's wife. And who is this? I would argue he's more powerful than all these people up here. What's a very powerful organization? Google. Yes, he's the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai. So if you remember that name, he's a very powerful man, but we don't know him. And maybe so I thought to myself, okay, this country is vastly different from my upbringing in the West, and it's also like becoming very globally powerful. So maybe if I live and work in India for some time, I can maybe understand, like, I can have a better understanding of the world, maybe. And maybe, just maybe, I can understand my heritage a little bit better. So as you know, my father is South Indian, and that's a photo of us at my aunt's wedding. And then this is a photo of my dad's side of the family. So in that photo, my dad's actually a fetus, so he's in the photo. And that's my grandpa, my great aunt, and my grandma, and then my uncle. Currently, my uncle is alive, but my grandparents and great aunt all passed away. So I scoured the internet for programs where I can live and work in India, and of all the organizations, MCC was the only organization that had placements in India. And I found the Service and Learning Together program, and they have many other service-oriented programs. So if you are interested, talk to me afterwards. But yes, I found Mennonite Central Committee's SALT program, and they had placements in India, and I learned that India is the longest running, MCC India is the longest running program. They've been running since 1942, but Mennonites have been in India since the late 1890s. So Mennonites have been there for a long time. And MCC India not only does this like global service learning program, but they also work with local NGOs to help build capacity for them to sustain, and various lines of work like women empowerment, education, health. So yeah, I discovered MCC SALT program. And so I signed up for that, got accepted into the program, and then on August 15th, I had an orientation in Akron, Pennsylvania, and that was just getting us oriented to the program. And then on August 25th, I departed for India. And MCC, first I was in Kolkata for 3 weeks, and that's where the MCC office is based. It's across the street from Sisters of Charity, where Mother Teresa worked. And the dominant language in Kolkata is Bengali, but they also understand and speak Hindi. And Kolkata became, so we had orientation there, and I met up with the other global service learning participants. One, his name is Luyando, he's from Zambia, and then this is Prantosh from Bangladesh. And Luyando and I had the same service location, but Prantosh was in West Bengal for his placement. So we got acquainted with each other. We also took some Hindi lessons. So this is Ruth, she's my Hindi teacher. And we also got acquainted with the MCC staff. And this is Shushant Nand. He primarily works with the global service learning participants. Kolkata also became this like retreat place. So periodically throughout the year, we would return to Kolkata from our service placements. And it was really fun to tour and get to know the city. And it has a really rich and interesting history. So here was a photo of Luyando and I, and Evan joined us later. He's actually living in Kolkata, and these are the reps. And so this was after a Christmas party. This is just a street in Kolkata. yeah, it's very crowded, very lively and interesting. And then these are actually US Army barracks built in World War II, but the US Army didn't want to stay there because it was too small or something. And so I did a walking tour through the city, which is really interesting. And then this is Victoria Memorial. It's not fully shown in the picture, but that was built to commemorate Queen Victoria. And then from Kolkata, those first 3 weeks I spent there, and then flew by plane because our train tickets didn't work out to Chhattisgarh, which is where my service placement was. And the dominant language is Hindi, and more specifically, I worked in the city of Dhamtri, which is a city of about 100,000 people. For India, that's small. Oh, the M is covered. Pretend there's an M there. I worked at Mennonite English Senior Secondary School, and that's a school of about 800 students from ages 3 to 12th grade. And work was different than I expected. The Mennonite school operated much differently than how Mennonite schools, from what I've heard, operate here. Our principal is Sikh. I don't know if that's a religion. And then a lot of the teachers are Christian, but the student body is mostly Hindu. And our curriculum had to be secular by law. So our curriculum was pretty much secular. So it didn't operate as how like Mennonite schools might operate here. But it was a very interesting experience. And I was also addressed by ma'am, like Elizabeth ma'am, Lisa ma'am, or just ma'am. So that was interesting. The teachers were very, very kind and supportive, and this was like my farewell party. So work began at 8:30, and we started the day with assembly. So we would meet in this middle courtyard area. During assembly, we had to sing the national song, the national anthem, the state song, and then there were announcements. Then classes commenced at 9 a.m., and then at 10:30, we had tiffin time, where students would bring snacks from home. And during that time, I would eat with the teachers. It's not a clear photo, but yeah, that's where I got to try a lot of homemade food, and I learned some recipes. And then the school day ended at 2. On Saturdays, we had half days. So we had school 6 days a week. The reason being probably is because we observed all the religious holidays, the Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, and Christian holidays. So 6 days a week, but a lot of holidays. So my tasks at the school varied throughout the year depending on what the school needed. From September to October, I taught rhymes and spoken English to the first and second graders. So this is a photo of me like teaching actions to a rhyme. It was really cute. And then I also taught spoken English to the pre-primary teachers. I didn't have a picture of that. But then in December, one teacher left, so I kind of filled in for her, and her job was supervising the pre-primary students, which was a big learning curve. I also taught spoken English to the pre-primary students, and then I taught second and third grade moral science and general knowledge, which are different subjects that were really cool. And this is my third grade class. They were very fun and sweet. And then the school year ended in March, but then a new school year began in April, and that's when I taught middle school spoken English. I didn't take many pictures at work, so, but yeah, that's what I did. And then summer vacation was in May. So after school, I would go home to the village of Balodgahan, and that's where my host family lived. It's about 16 minutes from the city of Damtri. Eventually, my family moved to the city of Damtri in April, but for 7 months, I lived in this village of 1,500 people. And the way the village was structured was very different than the town of Damtri. I didn't have a picture, but the center of the village has a really big tree where people meet for government meetings. And then there was one general store. And the village had a church and a temple. Actually, there were 2 churches in the village. Yeah, so these are pictures of kind of how everyday life was like. This is my room, and this was like right when I came there to home. And then primarily people in the village were farmers, so this is a picture of some rice fields from the terrace at home. Cows had this designated feeding area, and they would go home every day at 5 a.m. or 5 p.m., and I would go on walks a lot in the village. This is my host family, and we spent a lot of time together. So my host's father is a pastor. His name is Ashish, and he was a pastor in the village church, but then he transferred to the town of Damtri Church. So that's why we moved in April. So pastors have to transfer every 3 years there. This is my host sister, Abby. She was 4 in this photo. My host mother, Karishma, who worked at the school with me. She was a great mentor to help me figure out the school culture and everything. That's me, and then that's my host sister, Hoshana, who is 12 in this photo. But now they're 13 and 5, my host sisters. I had the privilege of being an older sister to these lovely girls, and that was such a cherished experience that I'll always remember. Everyday food at home is different than like how you'd expect Indian food to be, so that's why I included this. So for breakfast, I had chai, and this is like a cooked gourd and flatbread. And then for lunch and dinner, we had dal and rice. So this is cooked lentils. And then this is like leafy greens, or sometimes there'd be other vegetables. And we'd eat with our hands. And we'd eat lunch at 2:30 after school. And then another big part of my life was church. That was part of my assignment description, but also because my host father was a pastor, I was involved in the church a lot. So this is the first church I attended in the village, and guess who that is? So Bob came to visit for a day, and he got a tour of the area. So this is the church in the village, and it has about 200 members. So for 7 months I attended there, and then for 2 months I attended the church in Damtri, which has about 800 members. Another thing to mention is that because of missionaries and colonization, missionaries of different denominations were assigned to certain areas of India. So the Mennonite missionaries mostly occupied Chhattisgarh and Odisha, like the neighboring states, and other denominations occupied other areas of India. So most of the churches in the area were Mennonite, and then there are also Church of God churches, which are, it's like the Pentecostal strain of Church of God churches. So church, the services were 2.5 to 3 hours, all in Hindi. So I learned some Hindi. And the music, this is a songbook from church. So just the lyrics were written down, but people somehow knew like the tunes to all the hymns. It was very impressive. And the hymns were sung not in harmony. That's not really a like Mennonite missionary thing. I think that's more of an Indian music thing. And women would cover their hair in these beautiful like white scarves. The older women wore these white scarves, but younger women just wore like whatever scarves they had. And in the village church, the men and women sat on separate sides, but that wasn't like a de facto rule. I think people just did that because that was their understanding or their preference. And I joined the youth group and the choir. And in choir, I tried to read in Hindi. It's not great, so I would search the songs and try to find like the English alphabet so I can sing along. Yeah. I also attended a lot of conferences. There were many church conferences because there are many local Mennonite churches in the area. So I attended a youth conference, and the main speaker was from Ethiopia. That was wonderful. And I also attended the women's conference, but I was kind of like too young to officially attend. But my host mom also, she was mostly attending that. Another large part of my work was Vacation Bible School, and that was for 10 days once summer vacation started. And my role was teaching that song to children that we just did, and also working with the nursery ages 3 to 5. And then this was in the second church that I attended. So the youth group was mostly people, like college students in the city of Namtri, so there were more people my age. And we held this fun fair and made sweet corn, all the women in the youth group. I also attended a lot of celebrations. I'm pretty sure I attended 20 weddings. And that's because my host father is a pastor, so the pastors are invited to all the weddings. So most of them were Christian weddings, so the ceremony went pretty similarly to how you would describe a ceremony here, and the woman wore a white dress, man wore a suit, but then the receptions were vastly different, where the couple would sit on a stage, and then families presenting gifts would take pictures with the couple. While that's happening, people are eating a lot of food, and these receptions are very elaborate. There are either 2 receptions, one for the bridal party or the groom party, or if they're combined, there are at least 1,000 guests. Yeah. This is like the food at some of the celebrations I ate. This is actually what was out there, but it's coated in silver. And yeah, like biryani, which is a rice dish, and dosa. And then this is for a 1-year-old's birthday party, this really fun cake. I also had the opportunity to travel. So after VBS and during my summer vacation, we actually had an MCC full staff retreat in Sikkim. And the language there is Nepali. And that's in the Himalayan mountains. And I had the opportunity to see like the 3rd highest peak in the world. We also visited a Buddhist monastery, and most of the retreat consisted of like sessions with a pastor. And so it was a very restful time. I don't have pictures of the people, though. They need to send those to me. And then after Sikkim, I flew down to Tamil Nadu, where my father is from, and our family. And this was my first time actually visiting Tamil Nadu. And the language is Tamil, which is a very different family than Hindi, which derives from Sanskrit. So it's a very ancient language. And I had the privilege of visiting my family for the first time, my grandmother's cousins. And my dad met them after a long time, and it was also my mom's first time meeting them. So we met them in Chennai, which is like a city along the coast of Tamil Nadu. And we also had the opportunity to see St. Thomas Basilica, which is built on top of where Thomas the Apostle was supposedly buried. So Christianity has some ancient roots, especially in South India. We also visited a temple, which was built in 600 AD. So it's a very ancient, it's a place with ancient history. We also visited Kodaikanal, which is my grandparents' ancestral place. And that's on the foothills of the Western Ghats. So it's in the mountains. It was much cooler. And this is a view from our hotel room. We saw clouds rolling in. And it was such a privilege to see where my dad's side of the family lived, breathed, worked. This is a church built my great-great-grandfather. This is the house, also built by one of my great-great-grandparents, and the family that we visited still lives in the house. This is a church where my grandparents got married, so it was just a wonderful time to like see where I'm connected to. Of course, I had to include the food while traveling because food is integral to Indian culture. Domino's Pizza is pretty great. It's very different. Like, I think this is spiced paneer pizza or something, but it was wonderful. Yeah, and then we had this feast for my birthday in Kodaikanal, and this is Bengali food. Very tasty. This will take a long time to describe what I learned, so I'm just gonna, in a nutshell, explain what I learned, and I'm still processing this. It will take a long time to fully grasp what I've even learned while I was here. I did learn some elementary Hindi. One thing I didn't include in the photos is that climate change is definitely affecting India. It's sad that I only really fully grasped what this meant when going to India. I would see it on the news before going, but it is very hot there. There were heat waves would reach up to like 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And not only that, but most people don't have air conditioning. They have coolers, which is a great form of technology. If you're curious, I can explain that. But if it's humid, the coolers don't work. And even if you are like upper middle class, which 8 to 16% of people own air conditioning units in their house. Even if you're upper middle class, your workplace might not have even coolers. Your workplace might just have ceiling fans. School had to be canceled for 2 weeks because of heat waves, because our school does not have air conditioning. And also it made me understand like why there are so many climate change deniers in the US, because we can leave our house, which can be air conditioned. We can go in an air conditioned car to our work, which is air conditioned, and you might need to even bring a sweater. In India, that's not the case, and it's way hotter there, and many people are suffering because of it. So that's one thing that I learned. Another thing I learned is not much is in your control. We are dependent on each other. Coming from a more like individualistic culture, I had to experience that, and I included traffic in this picture because traffic in India is crazy, and you have to really just let go of control if you're a passenger in a car. I also learned while I was there, elections were happening. It was the largest democratic election in history. It was so cool to be there when that was happening. Hindu nationalism is really affecting the community that I'm in. It's affecting many Christians and Muslims across India. And yeah, I'm still trying to process how that affected my community. It even affected me personally, but yeah, Hindu nationalism is present and real there. It reflects a lot of what our nation is experiencing. It makes me wonder what does decolonization mean, because Hindu nationalism is a response to the Muslim invaders, it's a response to the Christians from the British colonization. What does that mean in an Indian context? I also learned from Indian culture how to like be hospitable towards people. I think Indians are known for being hospitable. I can't speak on behalf of all Indians. I guess I was in a specific community, but my community welcomed me and Luyendo with bouquets. So we had a lot of like floral bouquets for different reasons. And yeah, I think, I don't know how to explain it, but I want to be a better host towards people. Hospitality is very important. And I also learned that when leaving India, I thought individualism was completely evil, and I was ready to go to a more collectivist culture. When I was there, I learned that there are pros and cons to individualism, and there are pros and cons to collectivism. Due to time, I don't know. Okay. Can I? Okay. Yeah, so with individualistic cultures, I think critical thinking is more emphasized, whereas in collectivist cultures where you're expected to follow authority and listen to authority, maybe you're not encouraged, or it's not practiced to think critically. You're doing what you are told primarily. But also with collectivist cultures in India, I especially felt this. People show up for each other. People are there to support each other in difficult times. Maybe that support doesn't come from like a government system, that comes from your family and your community. And in the US, with individualism, even though we are encouraged to critically think more, and maybe I'm coming from like my bias of being in a community of highly educated people, we are facing a loneliness epidemic in the US, and it's a problem. So there are benefits and drawbacks to both individualism and collectivism. So yeah, I'm still thinking about what I learned, but I wanted to say thank you to everyone. Thank you for supporting me financially. Thank you for supporting me emotionally. I'm very, very thankful and blessed to be part of this community, this very supportive community. So I cannot thank you enough. And I also want to thank MCC for also supporting me. So thank you so much for listening to this presentation. Questions? Yes, so I guess I should have mentioned this. My host family did speak English. What was so fascinating was a little girl. She didn't know English, but she learned English faster than I learned Hindi by the end of the term. So they did speak English, and I'm very fortunate that that was the case. Actually, in school, there were less English speakers, even though it was an English medium school. So that's why they had the demand of teaching spoken English. Yeah. Yes? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I was really fully prepared. I did a study abroad in Ecuador in the spring of 2023. That actually terrified me to go to India because I applied for India before doing this study abroad thing, but I faced some illness, and so I think that terrified me to go to India. But then I ended up going to India anyway. My parents were like, you should try it out. And I would regret not going. So I was really scared to go, but then I went, and I did it, and I had the support of a community, both here and there in India. Yes? Yes. Okay, so Paul was asking I was in the most populous country in the world. How did I find like my privacy, and where did I balance being with people but also like time by myself? I would say it's fortunate that MCC requires salters and people who are in this program to have their own room. So if I did need a break, I had my own room to go to. But I learned that not many people have the privilege of having their own room, but also it's part of Indian culture for like the whole family to sleep in the same bed together and be in the same room. We're very private people in the US compared to India, and that also includes like information. So that was information that's shared. If you're vulnerable and you share something, people will share it with other people, unless maybe you're explicit. So that was a culture shock, but it was also good to learn that. I don't know if I answered that question, but yeah, privacy is a privilege, but also it can be a cultural thing too. Yeah. Yes? Yes. So the question was how, so in India, women might have different roles, and what did I experience with women's issues in India? I'll be honest, it was not easy. I saw how many women did struggle. In the household, women are expected to kind of do everything. And also, there are issues with hygiene for women, and in some restrooms I couldn't find trash cans to dispose sanitary napkins and products. Some parts of India are much more developed in that. The state of Tamil Nadu, I think it's 98% of women have access to sanitary pads, but yeah, I think women still struggle a lot. The issues seem very different than in the US, even though women do struggle with, like, there is sexism in the US. It's just more hidden. We don't want to acknowledge it. It was only acknowledged, it was much more acknowledged when the Me Too movement came. Yeah. I'm still processing a lot of that. There are efforts to empowering women. MCC has programs with women's health in villages. There are women who monitor young mothers in the villages, and definitely I do see sanitary napkins at every pharmacy. So it is widespread. I don't know how many women access that, but there are efforts, even though it might be slow and sometimes it feels hopeless. That's a good question, and I meant to look up the statistic of girls' retention in school. So the question was, did girls stay in school? Our school did have a program of like, kids had to write letters to their parents about why it's important for girls to stay in school. I wanted to look up the statistic for my state of Chhattisgarh, but I did not have the chance to do that, but that is a good question, if girls retained in school or not. It seemed like as the grades progressed, it was more boys in school, but I want to look up statistics for that. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, so the question was, how did I travel from the village to school? I went by bus, and we had school buses. Yeah, and we also drove my host father drove us because sometimes we would miss the bus. It's hard getting little kids to school on time. I think you all might understand. Yes. Okay, so Lila asked, do I think I will go back? I will go back. I have family there. My grandmother's cousin is getting older. So definitely for family, I will go back. And there are some states that I want to see that are very different. And India is just like, it's very diverse. And for what's next? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out. I do miss using environmental science, and I realized like how important it is to work on the issue of climate change when I was there. Yeah, so something with more environmental science. And I do like working with kids and people, so maybe environmental education or something related to urban planning, which is structuring how we can make cities better, especially as the US is facing like loneliness epidemic. How can we structure our cities to be more conducive to socializing? That's another idea I have. Any other questions? Yes. The question was, did anyone offer to plan my marriage? Fortunately, in my host community, I'm like young. So maybe if I were 25, it would be like, are you married? Are you married? There was pressure for me to marry an Indian man. Like people were like, come back and get married. That's what some of the teachers said. I did have one, there was someone at a church conference who asked if I had any cousins who were looking for marriage because she has a son in Kentucky. So if you're also, if you know someone who's looking for a spouse, there's someone in Kentucky. But she didn't ask me specifically because he's like 31, so yeah. One more question. Okay, what about my sister? So my sister Rachel did not come along. She's in Arizona right now working. Yeah, so yeah, we invited her to come, but it's a lot to travel. India's not for beginners, is what I like to say. Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm confident she has a lot more to say. So if you hang around and aren't looking to get married, yes, we'll get to have a good conversation. Thank you again for presenting.